Right, gents, very cosy today. Cosy around the table and quite cluttered on the table with 3 bottles. And we're doing a 3-way comparison today, which I was going to say will be interesting. It might not be interesting. I think 3 big blended whiskey brands on the table today. Typically, we source a lot of very expensive whiskey, very rare whiskey, which is very exciting to open and try. These 3 are not particularly exciting to open and try, but I feel like it's a worthwhile side-by-side comparison nonetheless. Kieran, blended whiskies, are we right to overlook them most of the time, or should we respect their role a bit more?
I think you should definitely respect them, regardless of what you think of the quality of the liquids. The fact that they sell so well all over the world, particularly the Ballantines and Johnnie Walker that we've got here, they sell so well internationally that basically buoys the rest of the Scotch whisky industry. Not discounting Whyte Mackay's input either.
We love and appreciate our single malt whiskies so much, and we're all big enthusiasts for whiskey. But none of them would be in business if it wasn't for the blends. And that's the significance. We're kind of putting ourselves, I suppose, in the mass consumers. We're putting ourselves at different corners of the globe here. This is Scotch whisky you can get all over the world at a really affordable price as well, that also is sold en masse. But we're expecting it'll be interesting to see the different brands. We've got 3 very big companies. With 3. This is kind of the headline blend for each of them. It'll be interesting to see how they differ and what we think of them, especially because we don't drink this stuff very often.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because, without sounding up ourselves, we are not the target market for these products anymore. Scotch is a huge, huge success all around the world. We're fortunate enough to work in whiskey and have access to single malts and an incredible range of single malts as well. But ultimately these, bottles like these 3 are the backbone of the industry, and for a lot of people it's their first introduction to whiskey. So it might be a bottle that their uncle had in a cupboard, or their first ever dram at a New Year's party, might be a Johnnie Walker Red or whatever. For many people, this is their first ever taste of Scotch.
It is the welcoming, it's the entry point to Scotch whisky. Single malts are beautifully inconsistent to one another, and they all have their own stories, and so do blends, I suppose, but they're looking to be quite different and contrasting in flavour profile. The beautiful and amazing thing about the science behind Johnnie Walker is that it tastes the same here in Edinburgh as it does in Mumbai.
And the other thing is that it tastes the same today as it did 30 years ago, in theory. So it's the craftsmanship that goes into creating a blend is so underappreciated, in my opinion.
How often do we have a single cask whisky and talk about the nuances and how unique they are?
Yeah.
You're talking about thousands of casks being vatted together, and no 2 casks are the same. And the recipes change.
Yeah.
Johnnie Walker, so Diageo owned 29 malt distilleries in Scotland, but this will have 50, maybe 60 different distilleries play a part in the recipe. And 10% of the industry closed in the 80s, for example. Yeah. So the recipes do have to change and adapt. Yeah. So it's an amazing accomplishment and a great advertisement for Scotch whisky. I mean, the striding man of Johnnie Walker is so iconic all across the world, and probably more loved in the corners of the world than it is here in Scotland. Probably a wee bit underappreciated here. Obviously, they have a different tier level as well, as do Ballantines and Whyte Mackay. They do age statement blends, but we went for really
entry level.
Yeah, the ground floor. We went to a local shop and got 3 whiskies that all cost less than £20 a bottle. We're talking they're going to be more cheap everywhere else in the world as well, because they don't have the taxes that we do. So it will be quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the 3 we've got, Kieran, I imagine you've tried them at some point in your whiskey journey, probably not recently.
Yeah, definitely not recently.
Too much of a snob these days, Kieran. Early days, you're probably drinking this on a park bench with your mates.
You never know. Today could convert me. I could be drinking Ballantine for the rest of my life.
Yeah, Samaroli, overrated. This is the real stuff.
And they're drank differently as well, aren't they?
They're flexible.
We drink our single malt whiskies neat, or maybe add some water depending on the strength of it. These are all 40% minimum alcohol. All at least 3 years old. We know Scottish law that there's still going to be a quality assured with all of these. But it is hard to kind of judge, I suppose.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting. So I think these 3 brands, obviously you've tried them before, does each one have like a hallmark flavour that you're familiar with, Kieran? What are you expecting from these 3 that we've got?
So I think initially I'm expecting probably Ballantines to be the sort of lightest in flavour and character of the 3 we have here. Okay. Johnnie Walker a bit more robust. I think they, I don't know for sure particularly about the red label, but I know they do use a bit more peated whiskey in some of their recipes. Like I think, in their black label does have that very faint whiff of smoke, so I wonder if we'll get that with the Johnnie Walker. And I'll be honest, Whyte Mackay goes further back in my sort of whiskey experience than I'd care to mention. So we'll see how we go on that. That could be a bit of a wild card for me today.
Yeah, I think it'll be. Yeah, I think we should do our best to put aside any preconceptions about quality or flavour profiles. I think it is nice trying these three kind of back to back and having three of us as well, because we like to argue, we like to disagree.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting because they're meant to be such a consistent product, blended whiskey. So we'll see what we think.
Yeah, I'm not expecting to hate any of them. I'm expecting to be underwhelmed by all of them. But
no, I think that's so fair. I think it's not our market. It's so cheap and consistent all over the world, apart from here in Scotland, where you can buy malt whiskey for an extra £10. It'll be quite interesting to see. But we know some of the quote-unquote core components of each of these because they are such definitive brands. So maybe we'll see Johnnie Walker, they're quite loud and proud about Kalila producing over 6 million litres a year. Maybe there should be some smokiness. If there is, but it's probably coming from Kalila.
Yeah. But then we'd imagine 80% of the liquid is going to
be grain.
It's going to be grain.
Yeah, and grain whiskey I think is something that people don't even know about, really. Like you can never visit a grain distillery unless you've got a hard hat on, a high-vis vest. It's really an industrial plant.
Yeah.
But this is a filler whiskey. We talk about these interesting, definitive flavour profiles of the single malts. Will maybe only make up 20, maybe 30% of these blends and these massive vatings. So, but grain whiskey is like rubbing alcohol. I mean, it really is. And it won't be using the best quality of casks. And it won't be aged for very long either. Again, no age statements here. So, kind of a filler up whiskey. So, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Sort of designed to be neutral. So
Yeah.
if we're going in with neutral expectations, then hopefully they can only go up from there.
Absolutely. Right, should we get started? Kieran, if you will do us the honour of pouring us the Ballantines. I think we're expecting this, as you say, to be sort of the lighter one. So probably makes sense to start with this. Ballantines is owned by Pernod Ricard or Chivas. So as we say, 80% of it will be grain whiskey, but the malt components we're expecting Milton Duff, Glenbergie.
Yeah, Glenlivet, Taberlour, some of the bigger names too. Quite light in colour.
Glentalkers is probably a lot.
There's a lot of these distilleries, the Pernod Ricard distilleries, that are just feeders for the blends.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if there's much Aberlour in it. It's probably there.
I think you would. I think you would be surprised. Aberlour and Milton Duff are about to ramp up their capacity as well, mostly to support the blending. So as much single malt as we're selling, it's amazing for Scotland. The blending is still, the numbers are going up and up every year. I am really surprised at the colour of this whiskey.
I remember it being like super, super pale.
Yeah. I think there's a thing that's certainly thought of a blended whiskey all being artificially coloured. You can see how dark Whyte Mackay is. Obviously, Johnnie Walker, almost for consistency purposes, is the reason they do it. So you can try it anywhere in the world and go, okay, that's definitely what I'm used to.
Yeah, and I think that's often the reason behind the sort of brown or green bottles, isn't it? It's often to perhaps disguise a lighter liquid, but I think that's come out a bit, darker and maybe not full-blown golden amber, but it's on its way.
Yeah, I think that maybe next to Whyte Mackay, it would look paler. So maybe that is why they sort of use the dark glass in the same way as Ardbeg do. They don't want people to be put off by the very light colour of their
What do you think?
Well, the fact I'm going in for a second impression is maybe a bit telling. I actually quite enjoyed that. I could really picture that going well with just a wee bit of ice, bit of ginger beer, and sitting in the sun all day.
It's kind of young and sprightly to have neat.
Yeah.
It is quite light and fresh, and probably again we mentioned so many Speyside distilleries at Pernod Ricard don't. We think it's probably quite I don't get any peat. So probably kind of mainland whiskey predominantly. Again, grain's quite neutral, but it's quite light and easy going. It does taste young. But again, we're trying it neat, which is maybe actually the unusual way to drink something like Ballantine's Finest.
I think it's a well put together blend.
Yeah.
I think we've been fortunate to try some of the older Ballantine's expressions, which can be stunning, particularly from the 70s and before. So I think it's this is their entry level expression. This is the most basic Ballantines. So I think it's good for it's a 20 quid a bottle. It's fine. I think it shows great. Yeah,
You can understand why it's popular everywhere.
Yeah.
Because you don't actually really need to be a whiskey lover to enjoy it. I think that is kind of a compliment to it.
Yeah.
In the way that it would be a fine first whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not the finest, but
I think
fine.
the power of marketing is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do we get much information off of Ballantines? Did they tell us much about? Again, it's funny how these different markets kind of market the whiskey.
Very sparse label, just gives you information about bottler, tells
This
you
one
it's a
doesn't say anything
blend.
about casks or anything, does
No.
it? No, so it really is that kind of. This is from Scotland. It says the word finest on it, and it's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it's got the main points. Blended Scotch.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah. So overall, fine. I think it was kind of a bit slightly more body to it than I was expecting, but yeah, inoffensive at worst, pleasant, flexible. You could use
I
it.
think it's going to be really different to this Johnnie Walker, which is going to be quite interesting.
You think this Johnnie Walker is going to be absolutely trash? So I think we should open this
I
up.
think this is going to be smoky, so I think it'll be really interesting in comparison. And in theory, young smoky whiskey, if we do get a peaty influence here, young peaty whiskey can be really good. Johnnie Walker Red Label is just the iconic. I think they sell something like 7 bottles a second of Johnnie Walker globally, and most of that will be Red Label.
Yeah, so really, I always find it's an interesting duality, for, as you said, it sells so well all over the world, but it doesn't really enjoy a great... and bang on cue, it doesn't enjoy a great reputation among, air quotes, whiskey people.
But it is an icon for Scotland. It's one of those, it is, although I'm anticipating not enjoying it, it is so important for Scotch whiskey. I think it's hard to really understand just how important Johnnie Walker Scotch is, because it is so iconic. And I think in some parts of the world it's like, if you're having a business meeting, Johnnie Walker is like the ultimate gift you can give, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
I hate the nose.
A true icon. Disgusting.
Yeah.
No, I enjoyed it significantly less than the Ballantines. I think when you're thinking about blends, you're thinking about consistency and smoothness, to use that word. This Johnnie Walker, I don't feel even does smoothness.
It tastes a bit like new make to me. I think it's interesting. Johnnie Walker Black Label, which is kind of the tier up. They have a tiered system, which is really interesting. Black Label is something I always have in my apartment, in my flat. I'll always have it. It's so consistent, and it's really enjoyable as it is, or in a drink, in a mixed drink. And that's almost like the entry level here in Scotland. Red Label really you don't see very often. You won't find Red Label on the back bar in most bars in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
I think the step up from red to black isn't a big one in terms of price, but in terms of flavour.
And Black Label has that 12-year-old age statement as well. It has that kind of self-assurance and quality as well. I think that's quite rough.
I thought like
But I can understand it's maybe not. It's not. I'm not the market for this, am I?
Yeah, I think for me it was like I agreed with. I don't really enjoy the nose. Then it kind of went up in my estimation because I didn't actually really taste anything on the palate. I thought that there's nothing here. It's just liquid in the mouth,
Okay.
and then downhill again on the finish. For me, it was quite rough.
Yeah, I think comparing the first two, if I was at a bar or whatever and somebody gave me a Ballantines, I wouldn't mind having another one. But I think if I was somewhere and Johnnie Walker Red was the only option, I'd probably switch to beer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be rushing for a
a
second.
great ambassador for Scotland. I'm really stuttering here. What I want to say. I think quite an unpleasant whiskey to drink.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah, I think with the
the
wealth of riches that Diageo have got in terms of distilleries, they've got all the casks in the world. They could create something that is more palatable than that.
Yeah, it's quite again the square bottle, everything. It's genius and it's colossal, but really not for me.
Yeah.
Next whiskey, looking forward to it. Whyte Mackay. I see Whyte Mackay. Of course, these are all massively exported, but this is a bit more popular in Scotland. And certainly in the west of Scotland, Whyte Mackay was always fighting with your Bells and Famous Grouse. obviously it looks a lot darker, and it's actually got quite a lot of information on the back. Triple matured for a smoother, richer taste.
Is that word again? Smoother?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, we're seeing this in blended whiskey. Say putting smooth on a label. Maybe it's you're not a whiskey drinker. Maybe it's your first time, and there's like almost a comfort in putting the word smooth on the label.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think Whyte Mackay as a company, I suppose, are quite easy to criticise, particularly when you're, in that world of single malts. So, they own Dalmore, they own Jura, Fettercairn and Tamnavulin as well. And particularly Dalmore and Jura have sort of developed a bit of a bad reputation.
I think for the colouring, yeah.
For adding the caramel E150, which makes the whiskey look darker than it actually is.
And again, it's one of those things that's been a massive success story for Scotland and Scotch whisky, because Dalmore was a malt whisky that was almost exclusively used for blends. And they've created a global success story in single malt from adding colouring and good marketing and a nice looking bottle. Jura's the one that's a real shame for me because it's such a good story.
It's such a beautiful place.
It's just 213 people on the island and one distillery, and it's just gorgeous. But I feel as a whiskey drinkers, it's interesting because they market themselves as a supermarket single malt and capture a massive audience from that. It's probably quite hard for them to turn away from that.
Yeah. And their presence in supermarkets is crazy because they've got about
success.
6 or 7 different expressions.
I think they must be one of the most successful single malts sold in the UK because it's affordable, it's consistent. It's maybe not necessarily it just so happens not to any of our palates.
Yeah.
But again, it's good for Scotland as long as they're doing well. They're much darker. It doesn't smell like much more. We'll see if it's smoother and richer.
Hurry up and taste it, Ross. I'm getting impatient. Can't wait.
It's got some more stuff on the back of the bottle as well, interestingly. It's got...
Let's see. I mean, it's not that exciting. It's all very... lots of words. That
It kind
really
of explains blending, which is quite interesting. Again,
Yeah.
the others are really just that marketing and that label. But yeah, very big in Asia, Whyte Mackay. Again, perhaps another reason for the artificial colour might be marketing, and they do, massive kind of forums and see what people are attracted to, and darker colours, often something with whiskey, it's seen as maybe being older or more indulgent. What do you think of the taste?
I think it's... See, looking at the whiskey, obviously it's a darker colour.
Yeah.
I think straight away you start thinking, well, this is going to be either older or sherried. And I think before you even taste it, you start preparing, ways to describe it. So it's kind of, Christmas cake and dried fruits and all that usual stuff. And it doesn't
It's
taste
kind of missing it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely... Well, we could say that about all three of them. It's not the most complex thing I've ever tasted.
No, it's
pretty straightforward.
It smells quite good. It's got a sweet nose, but again, it is very soft and subtle, and probably very easy drinking for a non-whiskey drinker as well.
Yeah, it's not as rough as I remember it.
No,
I used to remember it being quite like rubbery and quite bitter and quite.
There's not much alcohol. I think Johnnie Walker to me tastes the most spirit forward. This is quite easy drinking.
Yeah. So of the three, I would say we're in agreement that Johnnie Walker Red is
the worst,
the yuckiest,
the least to our flavour profile.
Least to our pleasing to our palates. Of these two, I'd say there is a difference, which I suppose is one of the objectives of us trying these whiskies. Do they all taste the same? And I think there is a difference there. Obviously, if you're having it, in a hot toddy or you're cooking with it doesn't really matter. But of the two, if you were faced with Ballantines or Whyte Mackay, they were your only two choices.
Yeah, I'd probably go for the Ballantines. I think maybe just a bit cleaner in terms of flavour. It's I feel like it could almost be like a palate cleanser of a whiskey. Not a lot going on, but perfectly pleasant. And as you said, I think that would be a good mixing whiskey.
I agree. I would go Ballantines. I think that's something that'd be good to have in a back bar or to have in your house for anybody coming over. You don't like whiskey? We'll try Ballantines as it is. If you don't like that, have a whiskey and soda, whiskey ginger ale. That would be really nice.
Yeah.
And affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Ballantines is decent enough.
Yeah.
I think the sort of dram that you could have a sip on as you decide what single malt to order. Just have a little Ballantines. So it's Yeah, I'd say they're all. I was gonna say they're all good. Johnnie Walker Red is not good in my opinion.
It really isn't to our taste, but it's as I say, what a success story. And nice to try these with you. Something a bit different.
Yeah, something different. Well, so overall, Ballantines a winner of these three.
For me.
Silver medal for Whyte Mackay.
In the
Lagging
bin for Johnnie
behind.
Walker.
Yeah. Thanks for helping everybody else sell it. To Johnnie Walker.
So, well, cheers, gents. Pleasure.
Cheers.